Right. Okay. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues, students, and distinguished guests. I am Linda Ronnie. I'm the Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor for Teaching and Learning here at the University of Cape Town, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Professor Sithombo Maqungo's inaugural lecture this evening. I'm standing in for and bring warm greetings from our Vice Chancellor, Professor Musa Moshabela, who couldn't be here this evening due to other university commitments. I'm sure he'd rather be here. Seriously, he's in a long meeting, trapped in a room with others. Allow me to introduce the platform party for this evening's event. Professor Robert Dunn, head of the Division of Orthopedic Surgery, who will introduce our esteemed professor. Ms. Adele Kirsten, who's the director of Gun Free South Africa, who will offer a vote of thanks, and our Dean, Associate Professor Lionel Green Thompson, who will deliver the closing remarks. A special welcome to Professor Maqungo's family, friends, and all other distinguished guests who joined us this evening. Your presence enhances the significance of this occasion, and we are delighted to have you with us. This lecture marks the conclusion of our 2024 inaugural lecture series, and we are honored to end on such a remarkable note. So aren't you glad that you agreed to, yes, with just a little bit of pressure to share your insights with us. Inaugural lectures are fantastic. They really are a time-honored tradition here at UCT, celebrating an academic's elevation to the rank of full professor. This milestone represents the culmination of years of dedication, scholarship, and significant research, teaching, and public service contributions. Achieving this rank is no small feat. It's a testament to the profound impact the academic has made on the field and on our institution. This evening, we celebrate Professor Maqungo's professional achievements and the values he represents: leadership, innovation, and a commitment to improving lives. His career truly exemplifies UCT's Vision 2030. Tonight's lecture, entitled Been There, Fixed That, Presented There, and Published That, Is This All There Is to the Life of an Academic Trauma Surgeon? Just by itself, that's the thing that got you here, isn't it? Well, this lecture offers us a window into the life of a trailblazing orthopedic trauma surgeon and academic whose work spans clinical practice, injury prevention advocacy, and public health engagement, addressing the urgent need for safer communities in South Africa and beyond. Reflecting on the spirit of this lecture, I'm reminded of the words of Dr. Paul Farmer, the late global health advocate and physician, who said, "The idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that is wrong with the world." Professor Maqungo's work embodies the sentiment, advocating for a world where no life is deemed less worthy of care or protection. His dedication to injury prevention and public health advocacy challenges us all to reimagine the role of trauma surgeons as agents of societal change. His global perspective, enriched by advanced training in New York, Jerusalem, and London, informs his transformative approach to trauma care and injury prevention. Cape Town's high rates of trauma-related violence make his work profoundly relevant. This evening, we will hear how he has combined clinical expertise, research, and advocacy to save lives and tackle the root causes of trauma. His insights challenge us to think deeply about the broader responsibilities of the medical profession in shaping a safer society. As we hear from him tonight, let us take a moment to appreciate the vital role of trauma surgeons in pushing boundaries, driving innovation and inspiring change. With these few words, I now hand over to Professor Robert Dunn, who will formally introduce our inaugural lecturer. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to introduce Professor Sithombo Maqungo. And Sithombo, I chatted to Sithombo a little bit before the talk, and he's going to deal with his early years from his home in Somo to reaching Groote Schuur Hospital. So I'll restrict this introduction to the last 20 years that I've known Sithombo from when he arrived at Groote Schuur Hospital in 2004. So if you ask most people, will say think of Sithombo as Professor T for trauma. From his early years, he was excited by, having known him from his early years, excited by and focused on trauma, orthopedic surgery, not only the acute management, but also the longer complications associated with these injuries. And his biggest clinical impact has been in this area. Along with his co-pilot, Marit Loubser, he has successfully elevated both the standard of trauma care, patient care, and the status of the trauma discipline within orthopedic surgery, which is an important aspect. Historically, trauma has been is for many the bugbear of the orthopedic surgery. Late nights, erratic demands by patients is tolerated by junior surgeons until the elective practices develop, and then they usually leave it alone. And of course, this attitude risks suboptimal patient care for this group. So Sithombo has changed this by focusing on not only the clinical care, but the organization thereof. Following in the footsteps of one of our great mentors, the late Gordon Saboto, Sithombo developed a keen interest in pelvic and acetabular fracture reconstructive surgery. This injury was previously managed with 6 to 8 weeks of bed rest, with all the risks of recumbency and long-term morbidity of early hip arthritis and chronic pain. He has changed this for hundreds of patients, maybe thousands, with early aggressive surgery. Rather than restricting himself to this, he strove to head our trauma team and unit, which operates on about 120 trauma patients a month in difficult resource-restricted circumstances. In addition to this throughput, he has raised the standard of care tremendously. Realizing early on that Groote Schuur could not do everything, he took platform responsibilities and supported Mitchells Plain Hospital prior and after there was consultant staff appointed there. As head of clinical unit, he now manages the trauma across the platform, ensuring patients access to appropriate care on time. This was way before Dorp Street focused on the systems approach. As his practice matured, he became increasingly interested in the skills transfer and research. This has resulted in 75 peer-reviewed publications, 42 of these international, and at least 2 book chapters with some in the making. Initially, this research focus was on a wide array of trauma topics, but latterly on gunshot-related injuries, the focus of his PhD, which has just been submitted for marking. His ResearchGate H index, I see, is 14, and he's over 1,000 citations to these articles on ScopeX. Early on, he completed a postgraduate diploma in health education at UCT, and he continues to mentor all juniors who show interest. This has led to his 16 EbMed and 4 MSc supervisions, with many more to come, I'm sure. He's been recognized with visiting lectureships locally and abroad. Along with Andy Nicol, he initiated and ran the Cape Town Trauma Conference, increasing our impact on trauma management rather than being dictated to by first world low-volume units. He's a regular presenter and faculty at national and international congresses and courses. He has facilitated increased international collaboration with our division, resulting in staff interchange. We have a guest from Yale University at present, and more importantly, access to funds such as the multi-million Wellcome Trust grant. He is one of our team that ran the HOST study, researching the influence of HIV on fracture healing and developing a database that has resulted in many subsequent MNEDs. Not only was the data useful, but also a learning process for our division. This was our division's first RCT, and I don't want to get any jokes about orthopods and RCTs. This was a well-done one. Nothing to do with ECGs. Yeah. And this elevated our research and demonstrated the benefits of employing research sisters, one of which we still retain today for ongoing projects. Along with Michael Held, He supported the orthopedic research unit with multiple research streams, one of which is the neglected area of insufficiency fractures in the elderly, humorously known as GORGO. In addition, he collaborated with the hip attack at ongoing basis global surgery. He continues to positively impact service delivery at management level as members of the Theatre Efficiency Committee and the Equipment Committee. He has taken on a wider advocacy as a board member of Gun Free SA and Child Safe, presenting to Parliament on strategies on gun-related violence reduction. So that's a sneak peek at a very impressive career. But what about the man? I've always found Sithombo to be a calm yet firm person. As you know, or may not, orthopods have robust egos and no shortage of opinion. With many challenges exerting pressure on us and at times a difference of perspective on issues, Sithombo has exhibited a considered, calm approach, playing the ball, not the man. He's extremely tough. In orthopedics, academics is not adequate to become a full professor. You have to exhibit extreme endurance and tolerance of pain by long-distance running to earn the rite of passage. Sithombo realized this, and he embraced this by running the Cape Town Marathon with a stress fracture of the metatarsal. He was one step closer, but not close enough. So he successfully completed Comrades, but as you know, you need two. He did another. When I last asked him, he said, never again, but maybe the centenary. I've experienced Sithombo as a proud yet humble man with a pay-it-forward philosophy. He impressed me many years ago as a junior consultant when he used to take leave and go home to Somo to teach mathematics to the local scholars. On one of these trips, he came back and he was quite concerned about the derelict playground equipment of his old primary school. And he asked at that point whether we could help him with that, which led to our division funding the restoration of that playground equipment, jungle gym, etc., with our divisional emblem out there somewhere labeled to the post. Just to finish off, I asked my staff for some input around their perceptions of Sithombo. And one registrar actually wrote me quite a long email. But I've summarized this. So this registrar is obviously precious. Described himself as feeling isolated and lost in theatre in the late afternoon with a malfunctional dermatome and a bleeding hemophilic patient that he was trying to harvest skin from. There was no plastic surgeon available, and basically he was getting the point that he was going to have to abandon because he couldn't make it any further. Apparently, Sithombo strolled in unexpected from nowhere and saved the day by making a plan with the Humvee knife, which I thought had been all thrown away by now. And this exemplified, the registrar community, this exemplified what the registrars see as support for the junior staff and clinical prowess. Other words that recurred in the emails I received were humility, unassuming, egalitarian, considerate individual, stood on the shoulders of giants and saw beyond the horizon, just a brilliant human being, inclusive leader, respected, gets along with people from all levels of society, gives opportunities to many, allows others to take responsibility with his support. Thank you, Dr. Sithombo. I look forward to your address.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. And also good afternoon to the people that are joining us online. So if my uncle walking in, okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about who I am, and then I'll share some of my clinical and academic career stories. I'll touch briefly on injury prevention and advocacy, and as they say, no one lives in an island on their own. So there are lots of people that I need to thank. So we'll do that at the end. So that's where I was born. So I mean, for a long time, I actually assumed that I was born in a hospital. Sorry, I was born at home, and then my mother told me that actually I was born in the hospital. So this was Butterworth, but my ancestral home is in Zomo, in Pune. And for many in the Xhosa custom, where your father is from, that's your ancestral home. But for many people my age, we didn't have too many photographs, but I did manage to dig one out, my mother's calendar. So yes, I was born in Zomo, but my first few years actually were spent living with my maternal grandparents. Again, it was a normal thing that time. So my mother should give birth and then leave you with her parents. So that's the homestead I grew up in. Spent my first 6 years there with again, if you my age, you may remember those photos from the Transcap. And my very first teacher was actually my aunt, Adenza, and unfortunately she couldn't log in online because of inability to navigate technology. But I'm going to acknowledge her later as well. So I then did my junior schooling and high schooling in Tata. The first thing I fell in love with outside of my family was actually tennis. And to this day, many people from Umtata still know me as a tennis player, and they still ask what happened to my tennis career. I won't tell you much about it, but if you are interested, I've done a podcast on that, and you can also search it on YouTube. But I'm supposed to say that it wasn't long lived. Then I went to the University of Natal, and that's where I did my undergrad. And we had our 20-year class reunion recently, and it was great to see some of my classmates, and some of them are online. So it was in medical school that actually the orthopedic bug bit me, and there was a book by Prof. T.L. Sakin called 7 Paths to Orthopedics, which just made orthopedics seem very simple and easy to understand. And then one day I was on call as a medical student in the trauma unit, and the patient came in with a broken wrist and an obviously skew-looking arm. Was given sedation, arm pulled straight, plaster cast on, back to X-ray, and when we saw him again, the wrist was straight. And for me, that was, wow, this is impressive that you get instant results for your effort. And from that time, I've never done anything else. I've done orthopedics only. So I went on to Livingston to do my internship, and I met Professor Ngolwane, who looked after me as an intern and as a medical officer. And I credit him mostly for my earlier career in orthopedics, because if he wasn't nice to me, I don't think I would have stuck with orthopedics, but he welcomed me with open arms. Then I went off to home service and back to Livingston for my medical officer year. Then I spent a year in the UK as a resident medical officer. Then I came back to Cape Town. And we worked hard as registrars, but probably the one event that stands out for me was, surprise, wasn't work related. It was a team challenge called the Total Sports Challenge that we did. It was a 7-team event, national event, lots of pros on the event. And I think Nochi is here. So our team came, I think, in the top 20 of a national event. And that's when I fell in love with cycling, actually. And then when I finished, I had a job in the UK. So I was going to go to Norwich and do a fellowship and then go back to PE to continue as a specialist. And unfortunately, Dr. Siboto got sick, and I was asked to stay behind and cover his sick leave. And unfortunately, he did not survive and he passed away. So now his sick leave eventually turned into my permanent job. And I was so committed to going back to PE, actually, that I left my theatre boots in theatre at Livingston, just as a show of commitment that I was coming. But needless to say, I never made it back. So after I stayed on in Cape Town, I then went on to fellowships in Jerusalem and New York City. Then I came back to Cape Town, and that's when I started my trauma job. And so, people often ask, so like, you've been here for 20 years, but like, what have you done in trauma? And actually, I'm proud of what we managed to introduce. These are procedures that which are not done in this country before I came back. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with orthopedic details, but I introduced, transsacral, transiliac screws for the pelvis, which is a screw from the left to the right, but done through keyhole surgery. We introduced new approaches to the country, and also new implants to fix the broken bones. Then, of course, it's an academic job. So when I was offered the job, Prof. Walters was the head of department at the time, and he said nothing to me about research. Gave me the job, and I thought, okay, I'm going to fix fractures. That's what I love to do. And the first two projects I was involved in, one was just a case report with Dr. Siboto. And I did this just so I could go to the Congress, because our department rule is that if you're not presenting, then you don't go to the Congress. So I did the case report so I could go to the Congress. Then also we had to have an M.Med, a Master of Medicine. So I did a case series with the late Professor Hoffman on TB of the foot and ankle. So that was my introduction into research. And I didn't think there would be anything beyond that, because I didn't see myself as an academic. And then enter Professor Dan, and comes in with a whole new ethos. And first thing he says is that if you're going to stay on, you need 2 publications from you per year. So, of course, being the person I am and born at the time that I was born, if you get given a job and you get given outputs, you respect them. So I complied and got myself into research. And my first 2 publications were lucky international publications. And one had to do with putting screws in a femur nail, and the other one. So I did the first one just purely out of excitement, because there was a new tool that was meant to improve accuracy and to help surgeons do better. And my job was that, we do this operation all the time. No one can do better than us, and we can do without this new tool. So I designed the study from scratch, and I compared our freehand technique to this computerized new tool. And I could show that we actually are better than the new technology. And that's the quality of our surgeons. And then also the other one was just to disprove a long-held myth that if you have a transverse process fracture, it always equals, a pelvis fracture instability. So also disprove that. So I stayed on. At the time, Prof. Khan was our head of department. And so, to me, a university professor was an old person. Now, if you look at the time, you had to be old to be a professor. And we used to have meetings with Prof. Khan, and he would talk about this ad hominem, and I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And then Lydia came home once and said, you know what? I was in a meeting with Prof. Khan discussing academic promotions to associate professor. And listening to the criteria, I think you'll qualify. So you must just have a look and apply. And I was like, okay. So I had a look. And now that was sort of my introduction into the academic progression. So that's my current Google Scholar. Again, I won't give you the details, but there's a QR code if you're interested. So I sort of stayed on with an uninterrupted service, and then we took a break in 2017. That's when Lydia went to do her fellowship in the UK. We had an interesting time, so we were there for 6 months, and for one of those days, we didn't have a place to stay because we got kicked out of our Airbnb. So I worked in the pelvis unit at the Royal London Hospital with these 2 fantastic people, Pete Bates and Homer Ashad. The other interruption to my service was 2 years ago. So we did this 6-week traveling fellowship to North America and to the USA and Canada. It's a very prestigious fellowship, and I got to spend time with these 6 wonderful gentlemen on the photo here, and got to travel Yale, visited the university, and Clay is in the audience, and she took us out there one day. So then I came back to Fortescue, and I really took an interest in gunshot injuries of the hip. And every publication we looked at would sort of just emphasize how difficult these injuries are to treat, and that many of them actually fail. So I had this burning question in my mind, like why do they fail? And importantly, what can we do, to stop them failing? And also, I'm going to show later on that we see far more of these injuries than anyone else around the world. So the answers have to come from us. So the first thing I did was to try and understand the injury better. So I got a group of experts from South Africa and from the US, which also has a problem with gunshot injuries. So I said, let's get together. Firstly, let's see if we agree how we can categorize these injuries, what to classify them as, what to call them. And secondly, see if we can agree on how to treat them, because for each one injury, you can have 5 different ways of treating it. And of course, no surprise, we couldn't agree on how to categorize them, and we couldn't agree on how to treat them. So that's why the outcomes are poor, because everyone does, everything differently. So I said, okay, fine, now we don't know what to treat or what you're dealing with here. So let's then go back to basics and just revisit the classification, but importantly also just try and understand the injury better. So I teamed up with the biomechanics lab and Sosudesh earlier on here, and Steve, they set up the unit. And I worked with 2 students, Habtamu and Rupam. So what we did, we then took these fractures and did a CT scan, and then recreated all the fracture lines on the fractures just to see if they are actually, similar to what is described in the book. And of course, our results were that they are slightly different from what is described. They involve some areas of the hip joint that are not described in the books. So then, because of that difference in how they in how the configuration is, then they're not the same as the fractures that you get if you fall from a height, if you get hit by a car. So we can't use the same classification, and importantly, we can't use the same treatment. So what do we do? Often the bullet is not trapped inside the hip joint. So we're the first to show that if you need to remove it, there is a technique called surgical hip dislocation where you dislocate the hip, but it's never been described before for removal of bullets. So we started using that technique to remove the bullets with success. And then also because many of them fail, and we've shown that on CT scan, they've got some other fracture lines that are difficult to treat. We then also introduced primary hip replacement. And by that, I mean, when the patient comes in with a gunshot to the hip, we don't try and fix it if we think that it's not fixable, and we do primary joint replacement surgery. And again, that's something that hasn't been described before. And what many people would do, they'd still try and fix it, and then wait for it to fail, and then only later on deal with the failure and try hip replacement. So it's a technique that is now getting traction around the country and a little bit slowly around the world. I'm getting a few people now asking about our results and also doing the same thing. So that's what really my research has been about around gunshots. There's a few more others. So basically, I've built a career looking after gunshot injuries and publishing on our experiences. But of course, like Prof. Dan said, it's not my only love. I have a very soft spot for elderly people. I love treating osteoporosis patients, and because of this, we were also the first unit in the continent of Africa to set up a multidisciplinary team that involves orthopedic surgeons, geriatricians, endocrinologists, everyone involved in the care, and it's the only way that has been shown to improve outcomes for the elderly people. So we set one up at Pallotti, Vincent Pallotti Hospital, and also one here at Hodeskier, which is appropriately called GOGO Unit. And thanks to Mark Conrick for partnering with us in this service. So I also do a lot of teaching, and that involves teaching registrars, medical students, but also going to conferences and teaching delegates both on theory of orthopedics and also cadaver dissections and practical components. And I absolutely love teaching. And I think probably the reason is that I come from, my mother was a teacher at some point in her life. And also growing up in the village, teachers were, basically the most educated people in the village. So I always looked up to teachers. And people often ask, why is it important to teach? And also people have this thing of wanting to leave a legacy, and like you say, like when you pass on, how will you be remembered, or like what have you done? So I've got a few numbers to play with, just to share with you here. So you say an average orthopedic surgeon, you will treat 50 patients per week, and you normally work 40 weeks per year. So on average, you will treat 2,000 patients per year. And if you work for 25 years, then you treat about 50,000 patients in your career. If you go to your course and you teach 50 participants, you will then influence the treatment of 50,000 times 50 patients. That's 2.5 million patients that you indirectly influence the treatment of. And if you teach in only 10 courses in your lifetime, then you'll influence the treatment of 25 million patients. If you teach in 20 courses, then you influence 50 million patients. That's the same as working for 25,000 years. But if only one participant in your course then goes on to become a faculty member, then you will have taught 20 faculty members in your career, and each one of those 20 will then influence their own 50 million people. So you then indirectly influence the treatment of 1 billion patients. And that is the same or equivalent to living and working for 500,000 years. So keep that in mind. So like I said, so I've built a career as a trauma surgeon, and specifically actually as the gunshot guy. You know, someone called me the gunshot guy at one of the conferences. And when the war in Ukraine broke out a couple of years ago, I was specifically contacted to join the faculty to teach the Ukrainian army doctors on how to treat gunshot injuries. And I mean, for me, that was probably the saddest indictment of our situation, that we work and live in a civilian setting, and here are army doctors contacting us to teach them how to deal with injuries from firearms. So then I've always heard this inner voice that says, okay, fine, we're teaching them, but is it enough? So by way of example, this is just admissions from our trauma unit from about 4 years ago. This is over one night, and this is gunshot injuries only, not all the patients that came in. So bilateral or gunshots in the femur. We've got the upper limb, again forearm, and again lower limb, another femur. So we've got a problem. And also what sort of started as a joke. So in our work folder, we have a folder that we call repeat offenders. Because when we started off, it was unusual for someone to come in with a gunshot injury, and then you notice that they'd been shot before. So it was novel, it was unusual, so we used to keep the names. But actually, we don't anymore, because every second patient we see that's been shot has been shot before. So Moritz looked into this with his great study. And so we proved that, like I said, almost 40% of the patients we see with a gunshot have either been shot or have been stabbed before. So when they come into the trauma unit, we know that they're going to be back. And if they come for the first time, they're going to be back. So is it enough for us to just treat them that time only and then send them back, knowing that whatever led to them being injured and shot is still out there in the community, and they're going to come back? So, of course, as academics, the first thing we did was to start a dedicated research unit called orthoballistics. But over and above that, the question sort of has always been in my mind. So, as clinicians, do we have a role in injury prevention? So, these are some of the thoughts I shared at the recent Global Surgery International Congress that was held here in Cape Town. So we live in a beautiful city, one of the most beautiful in the world. And officially, we're the third best city in the world to live in. And this is a very objective way of measuring the cities. And they've measured anything you can think of, population density. They look at museums, sunshine, price of restaurants, Michelin star restaurants, all of that. And the only thing that dragged us down in the list was our homicide rate. Otherwise, we would have come first. So Cape Town is known as a sunny place for shady people. Also, we have, like I said, we have a problem. So we've been called the world's most dangerous city. We've been like in one weekend, we've had like instances where 44 people have been murdered. If you look at the death rate in Cape Town, the average is 65 per 100,000. That's double the national average, and it's 10 times the global average. And again, if you look at where the violence occurs, or the most violent cities in the world, it's often the cities or the countries with high inequality. And this is the map of the world as we know it, where every country is represented by its geographical size. But if you were to look at homicide or violent deaths, then the picture changes completely. And Cape Town South Africa looks like that. So we live in a violent country and in a violent city. And part of that is, I mean, as clinicians, again, I sort of asked, what role we have in injury prevention. And if you look at the terminology we use, so typically a patient comes in like this, and we say 35-year-old man, he was intoxicated and involved in a high velocity accident, and he reportedly drove into an oncoming truck. Okay, so let's just revisit that. He was driving fast, intoxicated, drove into a truck. Was this an accident? What do you think? Okay. So what is an accident? Accident has to be unfortunate, must be unexpected, and unintentional, and often results in injury. Some people call it an act of God. That is an accident. And so now, so with this guy, was that incident really an accident, or could it have been foreseen? What is a crash? A crash is exactly that. It just describes a violent collision, and it can be a noun, it can be a verb. But importantly, it describes the event without implying any responsibility. It's a more inclusive term. And also, if you see it in accident, you almost absolve the driver of any responsibility. It was accidental, they didn't do anything wrong. But also, importantly, for the grieving families, if someone comes and drives into your loved one, and you know that they were intoxicated, if you call that an accident, it's still very hurtful for the families. Whereas if you call it what it is, that it was a crash and leave it at that, but don't absolve the driver. In the US, they looked at the crash, all their car crashes in 2001, and 35% of them involved alcohol or drugs. 14% of the drivers were speeding, and about a third were either on their cell phone, or they were grooming in the car, or they were eating. And they concluded that 50% of the crashes that we see are not accidental, and they replaced the term crash in all their public communications. They don't use accident, they use crash only. And because also they believe that if you use the term accident, you sort of feed into this perception that injuries are not preventable. And so as clinicians, we are lagging behind. We need to catch up and change our terminology as well. So who typically comes into our trauma unit, especially with a gunshot injury, it's mostly a young male in his 20s. These are individuals in the prime of their academic lives, and the economic impact of these injuries is massive. 45% of violent deaths test positive for alcohol. These are studies from our trauma unit here. And 40% of violent trauma patients have increased alcohol in their system, and 70% of the incidents occur between Friday and Sunday. And if you look at the homicide rates, and the homicide victims in the mortuaries, 11-to-1 ratio for males versus females test positive for alcohol. So we have an alcohol problem as well. And so it means that there is a need for alcohol control. So in South Africa, I think they say less than half of the population drinks alcohol. But the problem is that the ones that drink excessively. So the problem is the pattern of drinking. It is binge drinking. So the Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance is doing some work on this, and they've suggested some things to reduce, like containing or rather reducing the size of the containers. There should be no specials on alcohol sales. You shouldn't advertise. Also increase drinking age. And also, so they are busy with the liquor amendment bill. If you look at rapes, again, 40% of rapes are alcohol related. 60% of femicide also associated with alcohol. And these are studies from the DGMRA Trust that if you control alcohol hours and you close at midnight instead of 2 a.m., you'll reduce intentional harm by 17,000 and reduce homicides by 1,700. And that's in the Western Cape alone. Now imagine how much more for the country. We know that during COVID, there was a closure of all alcohol sales. And for the first time in the history of Baragwanath Hospital, there were no patients on New Year's Day because there were no alcohol sales. So that just tells you something. Now, going back to gunshot injuries, so these are the latest stats which were released by the Minister of Police. 25,000 people in this country are killed every year. And of those 25,000, the most sought after or the preferred murder weapon is a handheld firearm. And the firearms have overtaken knives as a preferred method of committing murder. So why do people prefer firearms? Because certainly when I was studying off in medicine, we saw very few firearms, firearm injuries. It was mostly stabs and bottle cap and blunt injury. So pistols are light and easy to conceal, they're easy to use, but importantly, you don't have to get down and dirty with your victim. You can do it from far. And also you get instant rewards, bang for your buck, so to speak, because they're more lethal than knives. 1 in 4 people that have been shot will die, as opposed to 1 in 55 who have been stabbed. And importantly, and Adele always likes to make this point, that you can shoot multiple people multiple times, so you've got far better returns. And what we've seen of late is now the changing pattern again, because previously it used to be 1 gunshot per person, but now we hardly see single gunshot wounds. It's mostly multiple gunshot wounds in the trauma unit. And this is an example of a woman who was shot 40 times. So women are involved, like I said, it's mostly young men, but now also children, unfortunately, are not spared. Again, these are stats from the recent results from the Minister of Police. Stats from the trauma units at Red Cross that about 40% of the children they see are caught in a crossfire. So innocent kids are caught in this. And why do people get injured, stabbed, or killed? It's mostly just interpersonal violence. It's people drinking together, sitting together, and then the argument breaks out and they start shooting and killing each other. So why is it important then to reduce violence? That if you reduce injuries, you reduce the number of people that need surgery. And we know that there are many people out there who need access to surgical care. And surgical care is a scarce resource. But there's also the cost to the trauma care. This is typically our emergency list here in our hospital. And many of the patients here are trauma victims. And like I said, these can be prevented. And what we're seeing in the trauma units is also mirrored in the forensic pathology services as well, where they are just completely overwhelmed. Remember that I said, for every possibly 1 patient that comes to us, there's a few that go to them also. And if it's a multiple gunshot patient, they have to spend so much time mapping each, because by law they have to map each and every entrance and exit wounds. So they're completely overwhelmed. And the impact on the healthcare personnel as well is overwhelming. We're seeing high rates of burnout from junior doctors because some have said, I signed up to be a doctor, but I didn't want to be, working in a military zone, so I didn't sign up for this. So 32 deaths a day from firearms is an abnormal situation for a country not at war. And if you look at the most recent wars, the Americans were involved in the Afghan war for 20 years. And in that war, they lost 6.8 civilians per day. And that is a full-blown war. It was 6.8 per day, and we're losing 32 per day. Same thing in the Vietnam War. Over 20 years, it was 8 deaths per day in a full-blown war. And again, in Iraqi, it was 62 civilians per day. So we're living in an abnormal situation that we have normalized. So the big question is now, with all the information we have, what is our responsibility? And do we as clinicians have an ethical obligation to be involved in injury prevention? But importantly, how do we shift our focus from trauma treatment to more upstream interventions? And the analogy we use is that as clinicians, we're simply just mopping the floor in the hospital, but the tap upstream remains wide open. As Desmond Tutu said, there comes a point where we need to stop just putting people out of the river. We must go upstream and find out why they're falling in. I'm not saying that easy answers, and certainly as doctors, you can't solve it alone. You know, it's a multi-sectorial situation. You need to improve education. You need to create employment opportunities, and but importantly, you know, it's policy interventions that we need more than anything else, and also political will. You know, when the Firearm Control Act came into effect in 2004, there was an immediate decrease in the number of murder victims in the years that followed. So what can we do? So if you look at the numbers, yes, of course, COVID was deadly. It killed many people, but firearms kill far more people than COVID did. And you may remember what our president said at the time. He said the virus has begun circulating in our communities. So these are an epidemic in our country. And we know that when the government wants to act, they can act, and they can act decisively like they did with COVID. And with COVID, our approach was mostly informed by science and by learning from countries that were ahead of us in the curve. And we know that to control an epidemic, you must contain and control the vector, and the vector being the transmitting organism. Whether that's a virus or a bullet, it's the same thing. You have to reduce the circulation of the vector in the community. And the only way to do that is by reducing the number of guns in circulation. Also, we know that with our lockdown period here, this is what the theater board looked like. It was nice and empty. We had nothing to do. We could, do some of the catch-up surgeries that we missed out on. Other countries before us also, there were mass shootings in Canada, Australia, and the UK, and they changed laws immediately to respond to the mass shootings. We're seeing more and more mass shootings in South Africa every week now, and it's becoming fashion. So we need to act on that. The UK acted by banning all firearms in civilian hands, and their homicide rate is 0.04 per 100,000. New Zealand had those terrible mosque shootings. Within a week, automatic firearms were banned in New Zealand. So they responded and reacted quickly. And 3 years ago, the whole of New Zealand had 11 deaths from firearms for 1 year. Remember, we have 32 per day. So of course, there are also long-term consequences. Of course, when we talk about the patients that are injured, we talk mostly about the ones who die, but they're also the ones who survive, and they become a massive burden to the system because it's young men. They don't contribute to the economy. Now, instead of becoming sort of tax generators, they become tax consumers. And often, if a patient gets paralyzed, the young boy gets paralyzed, the mother will then stop working to stay at home and look after the child. So now that's another person removed from the economy. We also have an issue with road crashes. And here, basically, what I want to highlight is that you can have legislation, you can wait for government to act, or as an organization, you can do something yourself. So this was under Sebastian Van Aert's leadership, where instead of using the carrot or the stick, they use the carrot to say, you know what, we have so many taxis that are transporting kids to school, and many of them are involved in crashes. So why don't we incentivize the drivers to drive better? So they installed trackers in the taxis, and they followed the taxis, and they measured many things like acceleration, cornering, speeding, and all those things declined because now as soon as you know that you're being monitored, you tend to drive better. And these were volunteer drivers. But of course, they were volunteers, but there was a reward at the end of the day that if you do well, then that was the reward that awaited the best driver. You could win a brand new taxi. So that's just an example of carrot versus stick, but also to show some innovation that can be done. So Nelson Mandela said that safety and security don't happen by their own. They're a result of collective public effort, and that's what we need to be able to do. So as an individual, what have I done? Like I said, I don't have the answers. So I've joined many organizations trying to find a solution, trying to contribute, trying to find answers, trying to collaborate with people to say, look, we need to do something about this. And at the moment, when people say, I must show my disclaimer slide, so that's my disclaimer slide. So what can you do? You can do op-eds. We're still writing op-eds just to bring awareness to the situation. We had meetings with the Civilian Secretariat for Police Service. Pradeep was here, I saw Pradeep earlier on. So we met with him and the parliamentarians just to give, because often with the organizations, there's no perspective that comes from the clinicians. It's often activists and the NGOs on their own, but then there are no clinicians involved. So there are no voices that come from the hospital. The voices are only from the community. And recently, we also had a meeting in Parliament with the Minister of Police, again giving our perspective on what can be done to reduce the violence. So as an individual, what can you do? And I said there are many things you can do. And importantly, it doesn't have to be like a big or sexy cause that you pick up. It can be something small. Sebastian van As, I don't know how many of you remember the Heelys shoes. The kids used to wear the Heelys. And many of them would fall backwards and then break their wrists. So Sebastian was out there and, basically spoke out against the shoes because they were, injuring children. So you can find something to do. You could be involved in policy action. You could be involved in education, treatment, research, advocacy. There is something for everyone. But if you're still thinking, or what you're still thinking and unsure of what to do, you can let your money do the talking so long. So feel free to donate to the organizations that are contributing to reducing violence. I'll leave this here for 5 more seconds. I'm waiting for more phones to come. You're all very, very reluctant. No, don't take a photo of me. Okay, and also for if you're wondering why Cape Town is so violent, or why the country is violent, or where the guns come from, there's more reading that I can suggest that offer fascinating insights into the origin of guns and gangs and all of that. So that brings to the end now the formal part of my talk. So now I'm going to go into the acknowledgements, and I'm going to step to the disclaimer that I'm going to thank many people. And if I've left anyone out, just please charge it to my nerves and not my heart. And importantly, I want to say up front that I'm a product of many people who've been very generous towards me. And at any stage in my career, I'm able to look and say, so-and-so, guided me through this path, so-and-so was here. So all along the way, they've been positive, or people who have contributed positively to my career. So orthopedics has offered me a lot. I've been to places I'd never thought I'd ever see. I've collaborated with people. I've met people. I've been wined and dined in many different places, and I'm very grateful to the career that I've had, but importantly to the people that I've met along the way. So I'm going to start with Prof. Dan. So he did allude to our running. I have run many races with him, and many of them he finishes before me. But then he limps afterwards. So Prof. Jan has been our HOD for a couple of years now, and he's been very instrumental in getting our division where it is today. And he's known as a taskmaster. He's also known for, sometimes you can sort of send like an email that is 5 sentences long, stuff with a hello, how you doing, I'm fine, whereas he sends just one-liner emails. And what he's less known for is his fashion sense. So he sometimes gives Michael a run for his money when it comes to the fashion skates. But importantly, though, Rob has been very supportive towards me. And when I wanted to embark on my PhD journey, so I sent him an email to say that I wanted to do a PhD. And his exact words are on the screen there. He said, it's a big commitment for a busy clinician, but you have my support. And I felt that every step of the way. So thank you, Rob. Then I'm going to go, so now I did my PhD, and I'm Andy Nicol, my supervisor. And so Andy is a trauma surgeon and a trained general surgeon. So when I submit my things to him, at first I didn't think he would engage too much with the content because it's orthopedics, it's not general surgery. But I'm amazed at his feedback. He gives like the most pertinent feedback. And then, I mean, like silly things like, if someone sent me like an article to review, and then they misspell or they sort of they misspell one word, I'd say, look, you misspelled whatever, accept, so please change it to, and then I'll leave it at that. But he would then go and find that word the other 35 times that I've misspelled it and change each one of them. And then I was writing about lead poisoning. So I wrote my lead with a capital L. So I thought, no, because if it's lowercase l, it looks like it's lead. And then as it's lead, so now you want to change it, change all the capital L's to lowercase l. So thank you, Andy. And then, of course, I work with the trauma team. So those are the trauma consultants. Grant is not here today. He's flying out. But with Maurice and Kirsty, so we're there in the trenches together. So well done, guys, and thank you. And of course, the orthopedic team, broadly, the project team. So it's, I look at the quality of our consultants and the quality of our registrars, and it's actually unbelievable that we just so, lucky that we get, top of the range and cream of the crop. I do the MO interviews, and it's so difficult to choose, of registrars to come and work for us. And the ones we get are really top class. So thank you for all your hard work and for all the questions as well. Because again, if you don't get challenged in questions, you don't really grow. We have a research unit that Michael held and Steve and Rob started. And so I also have a research team with Robin, Nasipo, and Nomsa. So, I mean, with this team, we do a lot of work, but I think what you enjoy more is our end of year functions, because we find the most amazing places to have food in. Then I have a good, with our nurses, I have a very good relationship with our nurses. Unfortunately, they have lots of respect for our nurses. So I join their functions. I sometimes just create crush without being invited. Sometimes I host the functions, the end of year functions. And I just want to say thank you to all of them. Some of them are here. So thank you for all the hard work you do. I started here, Cheryl Lawrence was still our boss when I started. And yeah, so thank you to the theatre nurses. I also belong to Global Surgery as a lead for trauma care and advocacy prevention. So thank you to the Global Surgery team. We've returned recently from a trip to Mauritius. It was all work, but it was still great. And then, of course, we don't exist in a vacuum, both as a university and the hospital. So to the leadership, Lionel for the university, and Shane DeFries for the hospital, and all the other managers and unit heads of divisions that I may leave out. Melissa, where is she? Probably working outside. So Melissa deserves a special thanks just for all the organization that she puts into these events. And also we work closely with the Department of Anesthetics. So thank you for all the support with the theatre list. And like I said, all the other department healthcare workers that I may leave out, I've collaborated with emergency medicine, with forensics, all those departments. And the company reps that come to theatre to make our lives easier. I also have a team from Vincent Pallotti that I work with Jill, who's online, and Michelle, and Shamila. So thank you, guys. And we have Brian Benston, who wonderful guy. Brian gave me a lot of opportunities. He's got me involved in the AO, so he's our boss at Vincent Pallotti, but doesn't know how to put his own bow tie. So thank you, Brian. And of course, we have a unit at Pallotti that was set up by Professor Katrobla. So thank you for all your hard work. And also one of my first mentors after my fellowship was Maria Skill, who taught me a lot of what I know about pelvic surgery. And my family from Gun-Free South Africa, Adele is going to speak after me. And also the guys from Child Safe doing wonderful work. And then I was looking through my WhatsApp groups, and actually I realized I have a lot of running groups. So thank you to all the guys that run with me. I promise I'm going to be back next year properly. Because the thing is, when you're busy, the first thing that suffers is your exercise and your training routine. So I've missed a lot of training sessions, but I'm going to be back. And there's a whole lot more there of my running partners. And so I've got a special friend that's in the audience tonight, Saki. Where is he? Where's Saki? Somewhere. Okay. Oh, the back there. So we'll sit in front. So I've known Saki since 1989. I don't know how many years that is. We met in the tennis court and we've been friends ever since. So Saki made the trip from the Eastern Cape. So Saki, thank you very much for coming. And also in this slide, I just want to also acknowledge Saki's brother, Snow, that passed away earlier this year. Rosie and Nyameka Mjesha, also I met Rosie in 1991 when we've been standard 8, and he's also made the trip from PE. So thank you for coming, Rosie and Nyameka. I've got other friends who are not here, but we go on our camping trips together. So like I said, my family is in Zomo, so I've got a lot to be thankful for my family back in Zomo. And also we have a family in Woodville represented by Butfununu here and Sis Dan. And so we've got the present, we've also got, the previous generation, also the next generation at the bottom, our 2 latest additions to the Willowville family. My mother's family from Mama Zolo, and some of them are here. So thank you for coming. And my siblings, Lucy, Mizana, and Yanela, Mr. T is here as well. Thank you for coming, guys. And we have a family tradition that we try and spend a lot the Christmases together. This year, unfortunately, I'm working, so I won't make it to the family lunch, but I'll be there in spirit. I also to say congrats to our baby sister, Yanela, for her recent birth of a child, Milani, and congrats to Sisa as well. I'm sure they're watching online. Also to acknowledge Lydia's siblings, Emil and Lino, and Lydia's father, Pa. We call him Pa, but his name is Eugene. So thank you, Pa, for your involvement and for everything you do. Pa is so committed to helping with the children that when the kids were younger, there's a group called Mothers and Toddlers, and he used to go to that group. And also to Granny, to say thank you again for all that you do for us and for the children and for the Sea Point Friday walks and the sleepovers. Thank you. And the Amagunya on Saturday morning. Granny comes from Namibia, so also to acknowledge the Namibia family, the Kistings in Namibia. And now to our 2 kids, Lanika and Livu. So I'm going to start with Lanika first. So she wanted to play a little piece for us for today. Yeah. Sorry about the time. I'll just let this run. So Lanika, thank you for the video. In the picture on the left, that's the first time she ever applied makeup. Okay, then we've got Livu. So Livu, his whole life has been measured in terms of speed and pace and distance. And from a very early age, he wanted to have a photo of him in a blur because he's running fast. And so all the practice finally yielded something. We have a speed star in the house. But of course, of late, his time is taken up mostly by cricket. And Angela, so many people ask, like with you and Lydia having such busy lives, how do you manage at home? And the answer is that we manage because we've got Angela. So Angela, thank you for being with us, since I don't know how many years now. She's been with us. She went to the UK with us as well. And for Lanika and Livu, no, she's the only au pair they've ever known, Auntie Angela. So thank you. And then I'm going to come to Lydia. So in our custom, when you get married, you get given a name. So many people don't know that Lydia's name is Mbasa. So Mama calls Mbasa. My siblings call Mbasa. And many of you sort of know her as a surgeon. And they say for every successful man, there's a surprised woman. But I must say, I mean, in this case, I'm the one who's been surprised the most. Lydia is the most versatile person I know who's able to wear many different hats, many different times, and do it all extremely well and very successfully without a fuss. So this is her. Like I said, most of you know her as a surgeon, but of course, she's also a fierce activist. She's also an award-winning head of division of surgery. And at some point, the kids got very excited when they realized that Lydia was my boss. So they're like, "Oh, Tata, is Mama your boss?" So I said, no, Mama is not my boss. I said, my boss is Professor Dan. I said, Mama is my boss's boss. So I said, at work, I don't talk to her. I respect the reporting lines. So that's Lydia, the boss. And Lydia also does a very good makoti when she has to be. So this is us in Somo. This was in Mbeleko for the two kids and her posing with Mama. So she fulfills all these roles, like I said, with remarkable ease. She transitions easily and fluently between all the roles. And she's also a mother to our kids and a husband and a wife to me. So thank you, babes. I love you a lot. So that's those pictures of our parents. So my father unfortunately passed away, but this is also a big thank you to him. And then before I say anything about Mama, I've just prepared a little something here. Let's see if it doesn't let me down. Come guys, Mama. Okay, so to say Mama, the kids call her Makulu. Where is she? Oh. You say thank you a lot. Thank you so much, Sibuya Namachezi, for all the support and all the love. And on that note, that brings me to the end of my speech. Thank you.
Wasn't that a fascinating insight into the life of an academic trauma surgeon and more? Oh, Lydia, did you know that was all coming out tonight? Let me please introduce Adele Kirsten, who's the Director of Gun Free South Africa, to do the vote of thanks. Thanks, Adele.
Gosh, Sithombo. Yeah, that's a hard act to follow, and I know I'm just meant to be saying a vote of thanks. But I'm very delighted and honored that you've asked me to do this. Thank you. We first met in November 2017 at the first International Trauma Conference that was held in Cape Town. And Sithombo was co-chair of the organizing committee, and Sebastian van As had asked me to come in and do a presentation to the health professionals, all of whom were mostly trauma doctors, to talk about the importance of health professionals sharing data with social justice activists and with advocates for advocacy purposes. And after I had done my presentation, I sat down next to Sithombo. I was sitting at the front. And he turned to me and he said, "I'm really glad to see you. I've always wanted to join Gun Free South Africa. I didn't know how. It's been one of my life goals because I want to make a difference in reducing the burden of gun violence in our society." To understand the importance of that kind of bold gesture is that we struggle to get board members onto the organization because it's a very contested issue. There is vile, toxic stuff that comes your way if you go into the public space on this issue. So for someone to signal that they want to join the organization was a very bold step. And I think we've seen in Sithombo's presentation that I think that's one of his strong traits, is a bold person. And so it was a really quick, easy step to invite him onto the Gun-Free board. And I think one of the first things we saw was his willingness to explore what does it mean to step outside of the space as an academic, to engage with data in a slightly different way. And he plays, I want to, all of the, a lot of the stuff that you referenced, Sithombo, I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to talk about what role you've played in some of those important meetings we've had over the last number of years. He plays a really important role in the organization as a board member is because, although of course he understands the metadata and the global data, he also understands the data at a very granular level because he's dealing with people who are coming into the emergency trauma room. And so he's able to help us understand exactly the stuff you saw, multiple wounds, people coming back again, the same people coming back again and again. That information is critical for an organization like Gun Free South Africa. Because, for example, when there are multiple gunshot wounds, we know that what that tells us is that there's surplus ammunition available. So sharing that kind of information with us helps us understand where the interventions need to happen. And he brings us into our strategic discussions about where the interventions need to happen. He also understands and is very passionate about the role that data plays in policy reform and legislation. And he's played a really important role here. You heard him refer to making input to the Civilian Secretariat for Police Services. An amendment bill was published in 2021, which had significant strengthening of the law. And then the Civilian Secretariat, which was managing that process, was tasked with engaging with a significant number of stakeholders. And the Trauma Advocacy Group was one of those groups. But I think the role that someone like Sithombo plays in that kind of interaction was that he was able to really emphasize the kind of economic and social cost and the impact it has on our society. And as a result of that interaction, actually, they published a really important opinion piece in the Sunday Times. And that's another thing, is that he's able to play and understands that as a board member, his job is to do public education, is to make people realize the extent of the problem. More recently, we had 2 meetings with the Minister of Police, Sithombo Maqungo, and Sithombo was in both of those meetings. And what he did was he really helped the minister grasp the severity of the problem by talking about COVID. So he framed the issue of gun violence as an epidemic, as a pandemic. And it was amazing watching the minister, because he talked exactly that slide. He did the slide much better than I can do, that we drew on international experience. We started looking at the data. What does it tell us about what's going on? And you could just see the penny drop for the minister. He suddenly understood it in a very different way. And he took note. He literally took note. He was making notes. And we've got an incredible board, but only Sithombo can make that kind of intervention because of where he comes from. Lastly, is that Sithombo knows and understands, and I think is willing to step into the fray of this very contested issue. So he's willing to put his name to an opinion piece. And this requires courage because it is not an easy space to work in. And it's not always a safe space, actually. One gets attacked from a range of quarters, often even within one's own small sort of professional circle. And so this requires courage. And Sithombo is brave, and he has a quiet passion for this issue. And I'm hoping he'll be on with us for many more years, because Sithombo, you are determined to step beyond, in a way, the relative safety of academia and the relative safety of your emergency trauma room, and take, in a way, what we call take the struggle upstream to really begin to impact on reducing the circulation of guns in this country, because that's the only way we're going to stop 32 people being shot and killed every single day. So thank you for that bold move of telling me that you wanted to be on our board, and for being with us over what's been an exciting and difficult time. And I think we're going to see some really interesting things happening in the next couple of years. And it will be really important that we have you with us in this journey. So thank you very much.
Good evening, colleagues. Thank you, Lionel and Linda, for allowing this breach of protocol. So my name's Lydia Kencross. I'm the head of the Department of Surgery. I'm Sithombo's wife and mom to Lanika and Livomile, and daughter-in-law to Makulu, Mama. Thank you for being here. I wanted to make a comment as the head of department, because traditionally the head of department gets the first dibs on doing the introduction for an academic in their department. But because Sithombo so strongly identifies with orthopedics, I gave this honor to Rob, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that as a department we also claim him. So this is a brief, and I won't be long, but I wanted to express really the pride of the department and our admiration for the incredible work and service demonstrated through this celebration of Sithombo's career. And it's a career that shows a rare and amazing mix of many attributes. And I'm just going to mention them quickly. He's squirming now because this is hard for him to hear about himself. So first of all, a really deep dedication to individual patient care. So this is a professor that attends fracture OPD and works with the registrars in the clinic until the clinic is done. It's also a person who's a technically really gifted surgeon. So he has to get those screws past the major vessels in the pelvis onto the other side. And as general surgeons, we know how difficult that can be. And I think he's arguably one of probably in the top 10 best pelvic and acetabular trauma surgeons in the world. And that's been attested by, I can see the orthopedic surgeons in the room nodding, by many of his international peers. He's a team leader, and he includes everyone in the spotlight. That's registrars, interns, physiotherapists, nurses, porters in the ward. It's not only the important people that are in the spotlight with him. He's a doctor who loves working with individual patients, and I'm always struck by how much he loves the elderly patients, and he'll come home and say, I have this granny who's got this fracture, and the grannies likewise fall in love with him. Um, and then, as we've heard tonight, he's a health worker who, after years of treating gunshot after gunshot and removing bullets after bullets, didn't sink into despair and cynicism, but rather channeled that energy, that rage at the injustice towards doing something about it. By campaigning for better gun control, for better safety in our communities, and really exposing the fact that many of our youth in South Africa live with daily violence that is only experienced by some countries in formal warfare at the moment. And finally, Sithombo is comfortable walking the red carpet, as he literally did on his ABC fellowship. He said he was going to a conference and he's stepping out of a limousine, walking up the red carpet. I don't know. He's also very comfortable meeting the Minister of Police. And then on another weekend, you'll find him looking after the sheep and chickens in Somo. And he's very dedicated to injecting the cows on a 6-monthly basis. I still don't really understand that. And then in between navigating those two worlds is this other world here in urban Cape Town, where work, family, and academia meets together, and we spend most of our lives. So we are proud of him as a doctor, a surgeon, and as an academic. And in my personal capacity, I'm extremely proud to have him in our department. And of course, much, much more importantly, to have him in my life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mbasa, for those remarks. So Rob clearly warned me off the double pipeline child joke, which I was going to start with, but I won't do that today. But I also recognize that as Sithombo spoke, that in fact, I didn't quite follow the what do you call it, the reporting line. Because the last time we spoke, Sithombo said that he would say in his inaugural all of the vernacular words that I usually use at my closing of these occasions. So I'm not sure now whether I should use them at all or not, but I usually say that this is Kamiro Rikhais, what the place that the First Nations call the place of the stars. But last night, as I was thinking about my day, I began to wonder what I might say in isiXhosa. And I was reminded at the university where I graduated, they sang a song at graduation. I won't attempt to sing it. But there's a song called Ihele by Nomia. And I want to just say the words from that song because in so many ways, the way we've tried to rebuild the culture of inaugurals in the faculty, this is the spirit that I think we're beginning to generate, the spirit of celebrating our scholarship and its intersection with the world. So again, I want to just honor Sithombo that you've chosen a civilian. I mean, it's a peculiar word to call a person who's not an academic a civilian, because I think a lay person is even worse. But I just want to honor that because that again begins to say to us, we are not of ourselves. If we're going to be meaningful, we've got to be translating all the time. So here it goes. Home, falala, obani labo, ba pia home, ngibona beza, beyikhazela, bathwele ingonyana, ongiyane, bavele kuphi na, obani labo, ongqongqongqo, osibakhulu, yibo labo wahome. And the song really speaks about the procession of our heroes who come into our presence. And it speaks of the idea that as this conversation in the song goes, I see them coming, walking with swinging garments. They are wearing head rings. Where do they come from? Who are those? They are the people with knowledge. They are the people in authority. Those are the ones. What is that? It is a procession of our heroes, a procession of our champions. Here is a procession of people of knowledge. Here is a procession of our heroes. And so, Sithombo, I was really quite struck this evening by just how unassumingly powerful your lecture was this evening. None of the dramatics that great speakers use, and yet here was great speech at its very best today. And so thank you very much for telling those stories in the really most ordinary of ways, and yet making the impact that you have this evening. It's also an occasion for us to celebrate family, because it's seldom that family comes onto our campus. Now, this is a peculiar family, because the family lives in the faculty almost. I usually say to the wives or the partners, husbands and partners, thank you very much for allowing your partner to do what they do. It seems like there might even be some instructions given here in the case of the partner, but we won't go there today. But I do want to thank the family, Nozi Maqungo. It's very clear that you've made a significant impact on this man who serves us with such distinction. And so we want to honor that. And I appreciate the song that Sithombo played, honoring that idea of our heritage and where we come from in our mothers. And then to the children, Danica and Levumile, and then to Auntie Angela, thank you for making this part of our lives possible, because UCT is better because the Maqungo clan is amongst us. And so tonight, that's what we celebrate. And so we invite you to some of the refreshments that will be present, will be served afterwards. But please, I invite you to stand as the procession leaves now. Thank you again. Linda?